part of what we have to do as an industry is we have to figure out where we're going to advance our capabilities, how we're going to change the revenue model for the market, and how we're going to implement that such that that bleeds back in to the larger infrastructure piece once it's been proven in other cases.
Welcome back to another installment of the Next Gen AI case study series. On this episode, we have Doug Kirkpatrick, who is the CEO and co-founder of Aridan, a company specializing in advanced wireless communication technologies. His extensive background includes roles such as chief scientist at DARPA and vice president of research and development at Fusion Lighting. Doug has been involved in several key projects and presentations, such as speaking at the Mobile World Congress in Barcelona and presenting at Stanford University about the future of wireless communications. We're excited to have him on the show today. Doug, welcome to the program.
It's a pleasure to be here.
So I know I kind of gave a bit of an introduction about you and some recent stuff or more notable things, but I'd love to get from you a quick Cole's Notes of who you are and how you came to find yourself as the CEO and co-founder of Aridan.
Oh, accidents happen. I'm a PhD physicist who didn't discover that he really wanted to make products until I was in that role at Fusion Lighting and then at DARPA, where I discovered that one of the talents and joys that I had is what I describe to people in informal settings as being a technology Reese's peanut butter guy. I'm not the guy that makes the chocolate. I'm not the guy that makes the peanut butter. I'm the guy that realizes that chocolate and peanut butter go well together. And the easiest way I explain that to people is I ask them if they have an LED flashlight, like 99 and 5/9 of the world say yes, and I say, you're welcome. And I'm not the guy that did the LED, and I'm not the guy that did the non-imaging optics. I'm the guy that realized that non-imaging optics for that type of optical source existed. LEDs were there, and that was going to be the first implementation of LED lighting. And I've had the honor to do that in things like biofuels for jets and a whole bunch of other things where literally I've just happened to be at a nexus of really smart people. That's exactly what happened here at Aridan. And I happen to be at a nexus between one of my co-founders, Dubravko Babic, who is a world expert on gallium nitride and gallium nitride RF devices, and Earl McKeown, my other co-founder, who unfortunately passed away during the pandemic. And his life's work was on something we call direct polar circuits. And the melding of gallium nitride and switch mode direct polar circuits is what Aridan is all about. That combination and a whole bunch of inventions that come after that is the IP that this company is founded on. And it's the breakthrough that realistically we need based on where our consumption of spectrum and power is going. And what's happening in AI is just going to accelerate that. We're going up 20% year over year. If you fast forward that out to 2040, you're talking from 2020 about a 36-fold growth in the need of power and spectrum. We already use about 3 to 5 gigahertz of spectrum, depending on where you are in the world. That means you need 200 gigahertz of spectrum. And as you know, to use another phrase, since I made you giggle when we first came on, that dog don't hunt. It's not going to happen. There isn't 200 gigahertz of spectrum that we have that's useful. The other part of it is that currently the radio access network radios in the United States use almost 2% of all electrical power in the United States. Take that up by a factor of 40. That dog doesn't hunt either. And you've got a problem. It takes a long time to change these kinds of things. I realize 2040 seems like a long ways away. It'll be here before we know it. And it takes us about 5 to 10 years to deploy a new generation of this RF technology. That's why it has to happen now.
So, okay. I feel like I tried to get a drink and quench my thirst from a fire hose.
I'm accused of that very often.
Yeah, let me unpack some of this. Okay, so when you're talking about spectrum, you're talking about frequency, radio frequency band for communications.
Correct.
And then you mentioned LEDs and light and their place in that. I'm assuming that unlocks new layers of frequencies for us.
No, LEDs and light are just an example of a combinatorial of technology, that LEDs and a new way of thinking about optics fundamentally changed how we think about the way we light our homes.
Okay.
That change happened in the 2000s. And initially, just so that we all think about this the same way in an abstract comparison, initially everybody wanted screw-in Edison-based LED bulbs.
Hmm.
Now, you go to Home Depot and you buy a new bathroom fixture, it doesn't have any bulbs. The LEDs are embedded in structures that make the fixture. Why? Because they last for 20, 30, 40 freaking years.
Mhm.
Why are you designing around something that needs to be changed when you're going to tear the house down before you change the light bulb? So that's part of the change, right? A new technology had to be what we call plug compatible, right?
Mhm.
And then all of a sudden we went to, wait a second, we can change the whole darn thing. We went from gas cars to hybrid cars, which are the equivalent of being plug compatible, to electric cars, which never go to a gas station, which are the antithesis of plug compatible, unless you say it's a different kind of plug. So the same kind of thing is going to be happening in the RF world. Why? Because it has to.
To narrow the focus of this, who needs this? Is this a general consumer thing, or is this more of a B2B and then to the consumer? Like where does Aridan get their customers and why?
The first customers who are going to use this is going to be what we call enterprise wireless. And the reason there is because they are incredibly cost of ownership and entry cost sensitive. So one of the benefits of this new technology is that it dramatically lowers the entry cost for somebody to deploy their own 5G, I'm using air quotes that can't be seen on a podcast, 5G network. And what that means is, instead of trying to piece together God knows how many Wi-Fi nodes, you're going to do this with a much, much smaller number of 5G nodes run on your own private wireless network. The United States has already allocated frequency for this. It's called the CBRS band. It's free, it's openly available, and industries can use it in all kinds of places. And the industries that are going to make the most use of this probably are going to be what we call the resource harvesting industries. Agriculture, an orange grove processing plant, a timbering facility, a farm or a vineyard that wants to monitor the ripeness of their vines by sending out UAVs, and now they have to fly them. You have wireless over the vineyard, and all of a sudden they can just fly on automated control from a program. There's a lot of the United States that is not covered. Most of the mobile network operators today measure coverage by what I would refer to as a bipedal metric. It's you and me. And they state correctly that they have something like 95% coverage. But if you look at geographic coverage, it's more like 70 or 80%.
Right.
Not covered. Not covered.
Oh, wow.
Because 90% of the people live in 10% of the geographic area. Think about it.
Yeah. So this would be localized cities or communities or that sort of thing.
Right. And then, so my relatives used to live in Reno, and I live in downtown San Francisco, and I would drive with my wife and our dogs over to Reno. Mm-hmm. And you would think that I-80, one of the main thoroughfares east-west in the country, has 100% 5G coverage over its entire length. And you lose.
It does not.
You have 50-some miles where you have no 5G coverage. You have 20-something miles where you have no coverage on a major east-west interstate. So extrapolate that out to the large open farmland areas in the critical breadbasket of the country, in the middle, the underserved, right? That is where there is a huge financial opportunity to deploy 5G. But using legacy technology, it's too expensive. The entry price is too high. With this next step in technology, one can put up a tower that is powered by a solar cell that has a millimeter wave wireless link back to the location where you're going to plug into a fiber. No trench, no power line. You're done. Now, that is fundamentally an entry cost game changer. Now I can push things out into those other domains, whether it's a timbering operation or an agricultural operation or a mining operation or an environmental resource management operation or fire prevention. You just go down a laundry list. And all of a sudden, a lot of these things which are very manpower expensive or simply just don't get done because they're too expensive to do, all of a sudden become incredibly inexpensive.
That's a pretty powerful USP. I can see now how innovative and unique that makes the product or service, or I guess culmination of both of these things, accessible to the group of people that you're aiming at. But I don't imagine a traditional marketing plan is going to be effective in attracting that kind of crowd. What are you guys doing in the way of building those relationships?
So we're not alone. The beauty of this is that there are folks out there who are doing startup experiments, lack of a better description, with this new paradigm for enterprise wireless. And they are hungry for this change because there's a certain set of these enterprises that they can deal with the legacy systems. They can come up with a structure and a cost that makes sense for, the top 5% of that business opportunity. But you drop that entry price by, let's be ridiculous, a factor of 10, and all of a sudden you go from the 5% to the 95%, and you unlock billions of dollars of market opportunity. That's what's going to happen over the course of the next 2 to 3 years. This technology then becomes validated in that part of the ecosystem. That then vaults this technology into serious consideration by the bigs. All of a sudden you start having conversations with Ericsson, Nokia, Fujitsu, Samsung about, hey, can we integrate this amazing technology into our radios? Which then vaults you into, okay, now for some of the network, Verizon will put you here and AT&T will put you there and Telefonica will put you there. And for the other big pieces of the network, no, we need to have that coming from one of our providers that we've had for the last 30 years. But now you're being integrated by one of those big boys. And now all of a sudden it flips. I've lived through many of these disruptive changes. The first computer I worked on was an IBM 370 with punch cards. That tells you how old I am. And now look, the phone I'm holding up has more power than that IBM 370 did.
Right.
And it's dispersed, right? You've taken the thing that was servicing just the 5% that could have access to that mainframe, and boom, now you have access to 95%. Think of all that generated. I was a professional photographer while I was in undergraduate. I had a Canon system, I had a Nikon system, and it was all film-based, and I developed my own film, and I watched digital cameras come out. And I still, as a Luddite, my wife wants me to sell my Canon sporting motor drive, and I'm like, I'm not getting rid of it. I'm going to hold on to it, damn it. Why? Because, none of us is perfect. I take most of my pictures now with my digital camera. And sooner or later, I'm imagining that my Canon sports set ended up in a museum. So, these changes, every single one of us, I don't care how old you are, you've already seen at least one of these shifts. And AI just came out. One of the things that our radio can do is it can enable the next layer of network that we all are calling 6G to be something that can have that type of dynamic range, right? That can be where it can automatically reallocate where it's doing its work so that it avoids loads, so that it literally actively load balances in a manner that is faster than a human could ever think of doing. And we go from having an effective usage of spectrum in Chicago or New York City, which is in the low single-digit percents, to having 50%. And now, all of a sudden, you have 10 times more spectrum. You dynamically change some of these things that some of our colleagues in the big companies are doing, which was called massive MIMO. And you can multiply the spectrum availability by another factor of 4, another factor of 5. Boom. Guys, all of a sudden we got our factor of 40, factor of 50, and we didn't need 200 gigahertz of spectrum. Imagine that. So this is where we're going. This is what our industry has to do. And this is an ecosystem. So the other thing that's kind of obvious is we have to do it together.
Right.
Right. You got to realize you got a team, right? You got people on the digital systems to your left and to your right. You got the security folks to your left and to your right. You got the handset folks to your left and to your right. Nobody is vertically integrated across that entire stream. It's a team.
Well, that's okay. So that brings me to another really poignant question here that I kind of jotted down as you were talking. You mentioned that you're not the only player. There are other fish in the sea, and that's okay. What do you see in terms of the mistakes that are being made in the industry right now that should be corrected?
Mistakes is a bad word because it sounds deliberate or misbegotten. I think one of the things all of us do, and I'm guilty of it because I still have my old film-based camera, is we hold on. Right? We reject the idea that it's time to move on. And that's human. Their entire Kodak went out of business because they invented the digital camera and didn't want to change. Right?
Right.
Think about this, right? It's so. Was that a mistake? Well, I think Harvard B School would probably say that in a case study, yes. But I think in some of these cases, we're looking at the installed base, and you've got two big factors pushing on that. You have a huge amount of legacy systems that are out there already, where the installed base in terms of cost is measured in trillions of dollars. I mean, you talk about all of the electromagnetic communications and radar systems on all of the airplanes in the world, including military. That's a huge number. You talk about all of the legacy electromagnetic communication systems for emergency response. That's another huge number. Now, the kinds of things that you and I work on, these phones, I mean, those turn over every 4 or 5 years. But the infrastructure that they invested that these talk through, they're looking to get those out to 15 to 20 years. Otherwise, the return on investment never happens. So there's a balancing act embedded in that. And so I think part of what we have to do as an industry is we have to figure out where we're going to advance our capabilities, how we're going to change the revenue model for the market, and how we're going to implement that such that that bleeds back in to the larger infrastructure piece once it's been proven in other cases. There's a lot of thinking that's going into that, and I think it's a balance between upstarts like Eridan, who go out and kind of, poke Superman in the butt. And hey, I'm here. Hello, I'm here. And, the bigs who have this really challenging responsibility. You and I turn on our phones, we just expect them to work, right? 5 nines reliability, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That is non-trivial. And yet a demand on the backside for absolutely astoundingly fast technology innovation. That's a big challenge. And the mistakes, yeah, we'll make them. Mistakes that we're making today, we're probably not paying attention to the math, right? Everybody wants, and marketing is overselling. 5G is great, everything like that. It's going to be so much better. It's going to be so much faster. But the actual physics of what you're doing is that 5G is maybe 10 or 20% faster than 4G.
Right. And we're
Really?
all kind of a victim of that overhyping of the technologies and the things and the tools and all that stuff. Speaking of, what should be happening or the future of the industry, what do you see the trajectory for Aridan being? Where are you guys headed for, the next foreseeable future?
In the near term, we're starting to do some very, very initial test deployments into some of those large M&O opportunities. The reason there is that's going to take a long time to mature. From whenever you start, it's 3 to 4 years. So start now, so that in 2027, 2028, you can start going up that curve. In terms of businesses, where are you going to see this first in reality? You're very likely to see it in the enterprise domain first. You're very likely to see it in the outdoor resource-based side of the house, as I was describing earlier, agriculture, timbering, mining. That's where you're going to see it first, because that's where they're hyper cost sensitive. And that's where having the ability to reduce costs with something they can afford and get a return on investment, those are the places it's going to happen first. Oil and gas would be another one that I would throw into there. So that's what's going to happen first. And then what's going to come after that is there's going to be confidence gradually building. I imagine that we probably are going to get attention from 1 or 2 or 3 of the bigs, and they're going to start integrating our technology into these systems they call massive MIMO. That's probably the next place you're going to see our technology. And then you're going to start to see some of our smaller pieces rolling out, probably with somebody else's nameplate on it. And I don't think they'll let us say Aridan inside, but I don't really care. All I care is they use it. And it'll start rolling out into your backyard. And they're so small, you won't even know they're there. You could literally integrate it into the interior of the light pole. It's about the size of a Wi-Fi router.
So this is cool, because my next question for you, Doug, was going to be, when can I buy one of these to take it to that really nice place I like to go camping where there's no reception up in the mountains, and then deploy this thing? That would be super cool.
So one of the companies we're talking to actually builds what they call repeaters for one of the major networks in the United States. And they want to take one of our units and configure it as a repeater. My guess is that's going to be one of the early applications alongside the enterprise implementation. Right. I think you'll probably see the first of those commercially in 18 months. Wow, probably take that amount of time for one of those guys to go through the process of being willing to put their name on it.
That's exciting. I'm gonna have to stay in touch with you for the launch of that. That's gonna be excellent.
We're excited about putting the first one of these up on our roof in about 6 weeks.
Oh, wow.
And We're just waiting for the FCC to say, yeah, don't screw up. So I say that in all jest. We are incredibly careful. But the bottom line here is get it done, right? It's time.
This is the part of the program here where we kind of wrap things up, and I always like to leave on a high note and give my guest an opportunity to really exploit their wisdom here. If you were to have one piece of advice for somebody who's in a similar situation as you in terms of leading and innovating in technology, what would that piece of advice be, Doug?
Look at where you're going. Make sure you're going to make a difference, and then keep the faith and get it done.
Sound advice. I love the idea of the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is now.
100% agree. That is a very, very important message.
Yeah, that's what I've learned from you today, Doug. And I can't tell you how grateful I am for how generous you've been with your time and your wisdom. Thank you so much. If somebody wanted to reach out to you to pick your brain further, or maybe perhaps work with you and your new technology, how would one go about doing that?
We have a sales at Aridan.io if you're trying to get a sample. If you want to reach out to me personally, first initial D, last name Kirkpatrick at Aridan.io. My chief of staff will kill me for saying that, because she filters the things and sends them to other people. But some of the greatest ideas that you see and some of the greatest partnerships that you ever see come completely out of the blue. And just have an open mind.
It's been a pleasure, Doug. Thank you so much. If you want to get in touch with us, it's nextgengrowth.com. Otherwise, that's it for this episode, and we will see you in the next one.